And we're live. Hello, everyone. So my name is Kinsey Dodds. I'm sorry if my voice is kind of hoarse. I think I'm sick. So hopefully I get better before React Rally this week. But excuse me. So Siddhartha asked me if I could answer a couple questions that he has about how I go about publishing open source packages. So I'll turn it over to you, Siddhartha, and you can explain what you're looking for, and we can chat about that.
Sure. So my question is basically around, the context is that I see a lot of open source packages by you, and most of them get a lot of visibility, get a lot of eyes, right? And then like stars, contributors, etc. that follow. And what I've seen is this pattern where even before you actually publish your package or actually finish your package, you start talking about it online, right? So is there like a process, or is there like a flow that you follow before publishing the package and after?
I think that part of it for me is that I just get excited about things, or I get public about things that I'm excited about. And so like anybody who's followed me for a little while knows that I've transitioned testing frameworks a couple times and CSS and JS libraries. And like whenever I find something that's better or that I feel is better than what I had before, I just start going crazy. You're like, this is so cool. Check this thing out. Like, it's very awesome. So not just my own stuff, but stuff that I see in the community that I think is pretty cool. I will, just talk about it a lot. Try to share good resources and stuff. And so if it's something that I'm building, I'm normally pretty excited about it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be building it. And I wind up talking about it a lot. And the fact that I excuse me, the fact that I have quite a few followers on Twitter helps with the visibility part a lot. I think that like there are some things that I've made that really aren't all that interesting to a lot of people. And so despite the number of followers I have on Twitter or whatever, those things don't get a whole lot of visibility. So there is something to be said for something that's actually useful. But there are a lot of useful things out there that don't get a lot of visibility because people don't have followings and that kind of thing. Nobody hears about it. So it's like a combination of something that's useful and the fact that it gets in front of the face of a lot of people. I also will shamelessly plug my own stuff to newsletters. So if you look at my direct message history with Peter Cooper, it'll just be me like throwing a bunch of links at him, like, check this out, like your readers might be interested in this. And I'd say like half of the things that I send to him, he's like, okay, yeah, I'll include that somewhere in the newsletter. Sometimes I'll get up at the top and that will be an amazing day for the popularity of the project. But lots of the times it'll just be something in the middle or the bottom or something, which is fine. It still gives me a lot of visibility. And the reason that I care about my projects getting visibility is because my goal for a project is that it's useful to people, and that I get contributors giving back to the project. And if nobody knows about the project, then like there won't be any contributors. So awareness, I think, is important for the health of a project. And eventually I'm going to lose interest in the project, but I don't want the project to die. And so without contributors and users, the project is going to die. And so building up a user base and a contributor base, it's all kind of part of this funnel of like, there's the world, and then that funnels down into the people who know about your project, and then the people who use your project, and then people who contribute. And so trying to increase the flow into that pipeline is part of the reason why I'm so public about my stuff too. So that's a couple words there.
Okay. And do you have like a method of how would you go about the README? Like README is the first thing people see, right? So do you have like a couple of rules that you follow over there?
Yeah. Anybody who's seen some of my projects in the last year or so has seen there's a common trend. So actually, I'll just pull up Downshift really quick just to kind of remind myself. I do have a very specific layout of how I do my readmes. Sorry, excuse me one second. Yeah, okay, so start up at the top. Actually, I'll just share my screen really quick. One second.
Sure.
And then we can look at it together. Okay, and share screen. Okay, yeah, so here's Downshift. At the top, if it's a project that I care enough about to have some sort of logo, then that'll go there, but I don't have the title. I have started having an emoji that represents the project if I care enough about it. So yeah, that's Downshift. And just like a tagline that is kind of describes quickly what the project is. Then I have a bunch of badges. Looks like this one failed to load well. So let's just refresh really quick and see if that loads. And so people will look at these, sometimes look at these badges and they're like, oh my goodness, like who cares? But for me, I think badges are a really useful way to communicate the status of the project and make invitations. So yeah, every badge here has a purpose. It's not just to make the top of my README colorful. I think these are useful information for people. Most people assume MIT license, but it's nice to remove all ambiguity just really quickly. And then this is for like invitations to participate. So, hey, we have a bunch of contributors and you can check those people out and we appreciate them and we'd appreciate you if you'd contribute. So here's how you go about doing that. And come join us on chat and make sure when you're interacting with us that you follow our code of conduct. And then this is like some metadata about the project. So, hey, we support React and Preact, and we're, these are our size because this is, front end. It's intended for front end, so you probably care about the size, the amount of JavaScript you'll be parsing. And module formats, I just did that because Styled Components did it, and it looked like a good idea. So, excuse me. And then some more invitations. I don't think anybody's ever clicked the tweet button before, but people are welcome to do that. And so, yeah, after the badges, then I go into the problem. I think if anybody's ever read Start With Why, well, if you haven't read Start With Why, I recommend it. It's a great book. But that's kind of what motivates having the problem here at the top is people are going to look at the project and they're trying to evaluate whether it's useful to them. And if you don't explain what problem it was intended to solve, then that's hard for them to decipher. And so they might just ignore it, thinking that it's intended for something else, when in actuality, it actually could be very useful for them. So explaining right up front what it's capable of or really the problem that it's trying to solve, I think is important. And then once people have decided whether or not this is something they care about, then the next thing that they want to know is how this library or this project goes about solving that problem, because not all solutions are created equal. And so having like explaining this uses function composition to do the thing, or this is, whatever, however you want to go about solving the problem. You talk about some implementation details in here to explain how the solution works, but yeah, more high-level stuff inside the solution. Sometimes I'll have like an example in here as well. So yeah, then we go into the installation, which is normally like you'd think it's really straightforward, but sometimes this is the first project that somebody's ever used inside of their new code base that they're starting or whatever. And so explaining how it's distributed, giving a link to what NPM is and what node is, and then how to, like, what command to run to make it work. I think all of those things are important. And so, yeah, I recommend that people give very explicit instructions on how to install it. And then a basic code example of usage is useful. And I try to put this up at the top just because it makes it more straightforward to people knowing exactly, and just kind of having a general idea of how things work. Like maybe I wouldn't do things exactly this way all the time, but having an idea of this is kind of what you're looking at when you're using this project is really useful. And then this is like API documentation inside of the usage section. So yeah, just a bunch of API docs. And there's a mix of like structure and just prose explaining things and stuff. It all really kind of depends on the library. But yeah, that's basically the usage section. I think examples are really critical to open source projects. I get like way fewer questions on chat and in the issues when I have a big list of examples. And so, and then enabling people to create their own examples. I do this with Glamorous as well. I did this with Angular Formally back in the day, and I had like 60 examples. You can still find them actually. And yeah, so that's really useful, enabling people to contribute to your project. I'll talk more about that later. But then there's nothing new under the sun really. And so describing your inspiration, like where the ideas came from, is, I think, the right thing to do, to credit the people that have influenced the creation of this thing. And so, yeah, I always have an inspiration section. I also list other solutions if other solutions exist, because like we're not in this game to win necessarily. We're in this game to provide value to the world. And if your project doesn't provide that value, then maybe some other project will. And I think it's only fitting and friendly and helpful to link to other resources. Then I have this contributors thing. I do not hand code this. This is generated by CLI, and I don't normally add people myself. Most of the time, these people will add themselves, but they just run a script and they get added to this list. And I think this is useful because, see, like for example, Ryan Florence, he didn't actually contribute any code, so you're not going to see him on the, in the contributor list that GitHub shows, but he contributed a huge amount to some of the ideas and gave some feedback. Jared Forsyth as well. And so I recognize those as contributions to the project, and I want to give them the same shout outs and accolades as anybody else. And then Kai also provided great feedback. And so he filed a bug. Julian also provided amazing feedback. Yeah, I think recognizing people for their contributions is valuable. So that's what that's for. Then I always end up with a license. So that is the structure of my READMEs. Yeah, do you have any questions about that?
No, actually. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Cool.
The only question that I have is about the usage, right? So the example that you've given is pretty comprehensive, right? And do you think that scares away people because like the example looks so complicated that people would assume that the library is complicated?
Yeah, that's a good question. So downshift is kind of a primitive component. And so that's about as simple an example as you're going to get.
Okay.
But yeah, generally it's nice to have the usage example be like, if you're within the use cases of our defaults, then this is all you have to do. And often like usage example for my libraries can be like 2 or 3 lines. So yeah, I definitely recommend the first example needs to be useful, but can just rely on some of the defaults that your library provides. Yeah, downshift is kind of an exception to that, but yeah, generally it's good. And then you want to have examples for using the full API. Like here are all the options that you can configure and whatever.
Sure. All right. My last question on this is, so I've seen a lot of your libraries start on your GitHub handle, but then end up on PayPal, right? So is that like, is that something that PayPal asks you to do, or is that something you do for, like making sure it's sustainable?
Good question. So that actually has only happened once. Well, not entirely. No, the Downshift, that kind of happened too. Glamorous and Downshift are the only two that I have worked on that are on the PayPal org. And the way that those worked was Glamorous, I built it for PayPal, but it was the first PayPal open source project that I'd created. So I thought, like, just to make it easy, I put it on my own user. And then when I was ready to publish, I said, hey, PayPal, I made this thing. Like, can I should probably put it in the PayPal org. And they're like, yeah, you actually probably should do that. So let's make that happen. So with Downshift, there's a process to get projects in the PayPal org and actually open source stuff that I am paid to work on. And so with Downshift, I actually started development in Code Sandbox, which is amazing, by the way, so awesome. Yeah. And I live streamed the creation of it, and some people were watching and really interested in contributing to it. And it's kind of hard to contribute to a project that lives inside Code Sandbox. So I talked with the folks at PayPal and I said, hey, there are people who want to contribute to this thing. So can we get this ready to open source? And they said, yeah, sure, we'll get to it as soon as we can. But I didn't want to wait. So I said, is it okay if I just put it as a private repo under my username? And they said, yeah, that's fine. So I made it a private repo and I opened it up on Twitter and said, hey, anybody who wants to help, then just send me a direct message with your username. And I added like 40 people as collaborators on the project who were interested in, and most of them didn't, they may have looked at it, but they didn't really do a whole lot. But I did get quite a few people who contributed to that. Yeah, and then when PayPal was like, yep, you're good to go, then I moved it over to the PayPal org and it was open, so it wasn't private anymore. And then actually at the time it was called React Autocompletely, and then I changed it to React Kadabra, and now it's Downshift. Yeah. So there was a bunch of stuff going on there. But yeah, Downshift should be released this week, hopefully like tomorrow or maybe even today, so we'll see. But yeah, that was an answer to your question. That like PayPal actually is like I'm on PayPal time, and so that's why they go into the PayPal org. If it's created before PayPal and like we're using it at PayPal and I need to work on it or something, then I can work on it during work hours and I don't have to transfer it over to the PayPal org. But I created these two things for PayPal, so it makes sense. It's not really a sustainability thing.
All right, sure. Yeah, I think that's all the questions that I had.
Cool. Do you mind if I wanted to talk about contributors a little bit, if we got a little bit more time? Yeah. Okay, cool. So contributors are a huge part of my open source projects. And so this contributing MD has gone through many iterations to try and make it as helpful and friendly as possible. So my contributing MD always has like, understands that like people aren't required to contribute to a project. Not even I am required to contribute to a project. So thank you so much. That's part of the reason that I have the all contributors thing at the bottom of the README, is to express gratitude to people who don't actually have to contribute to the project. Really friendly to first timers. So you go to this free video series on Egghead about how to contribute to open source. And totally free, so anybody can watch that. And I have explicit instructions. I have a script that validates everything's working, and so if like before people even make changes, they should run a script that validates that everything is set up properly. And then here's a tip for people keeping their fork up to date with the latest from the repo, like the original or upstream repo. And then just explanations of, in this project specifically, this is how we do certain things. Here's how to add yourself as a contributor. Here's some explanation of how we do releases and stuff. I also have Git hooks that run the validate script before you commit, but I don't enable those for everybody. I just enable those for people who opt in because I don't want to have new contributors have a linting error prevent them from committing their code, and they're like, I don't know how to use Git to like make it not do that, so I guess I'll just give up here. So you want to lower as many barriers as you can, so I have that as well. And then shoot, there was something else I wanted to bring about this. Yeah, anyway, just lowering the barriers. Oh yeah, I remembered. I'll talk about it in a sec. Lowering the barriers to entry for contributors is, I think, a really valuable thing, and every tool that you use should be as or should bring a lot of value to the project to like add the complexity, and you want to take off as much complexity for new contributors especially. And another thing is, like, if somebody files an issue on your project, then invite them to fix the issue first before you just run and go and fix it, because it may take longer for them to fix the issue, and it may take you longer to teach them how to fix the issue, but it will be like really valuable to you to do that, because you'll wind up with somebody who actually knows the project a little bit, at least an area of the project, and somebody who might be a little bit more invested in the project. So that's some thoughts on contributing. One other thing is I do have a generator for all this stuff. So like to make sure it includes the like pretty much most of the stuff that I use in most of my libraries. So that is generator KCD OSS, and this is a Yeoman generator. And so I'm not going to make this generic enough for anybody to use. It's just for me. So feel free to fork it and make it your own thing. But yeah, I highly recommend a generator if you plan on making lots of open source projects, because it's really useful. So anyway, just a couple of things I wanted to make sure I mentioned.
Awesome.
Okay, well, if that was everything, then yeah, thanks for having me for this little chat. It's always fun to chat. And do you want to, Siddharth, do you want to give a shout out to the video thing you're working on right now?
Oh yeah, so I'm doing a tiny show called the @SiddharthKP Show, where I talk about news from the JavaScript world. And yeah, so you can check it out on my Twitter, I guess. Yeah, it's somewhere in the description, so you can go there and check it out. And yeah, next episode is on Thursday, which is, wow, I should get to work. Yeah. We're going to talk about the React license, so it's going to be fun.
Nice. I was actually thinking about that this morning, and I think anybody who writes a think piece on the React license who is not a lawyer is asserting that they know more than lawyers do.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Lots of companies have like really smart lawyers, and they say it's okay. So anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. I look forward to your episode. I liked the last one. It was super good. So
thanks.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, thanks so much. This was a lot of fun.
Yep. Same here.
See ya.